Welcome again to another video with ARTO, looking at people within ARTO and the experts and the insights they're providing in their market. I'm joined today by Éoin O'Donoghue. So Éoin leads our Medical Affairs Europe division. So without further ado, Éoin, what is the status of the European medical affairs market at the moment?
Yeah, so thanks, Elliot. It's an interesting one at the moment, I would say. It's definitely an employer-led market, whereby we're hearing there's hundreds of applications. I think I spoke to one senior medical affairs leader in Barcelona about 2 weeks ago, and he said for his head of medical affairs, he had about 400 applicants. Some relevant, some not relevant, but it's a case where people really have to use those networks to stand out. That's the number one thing. That's one piece of advice I'd give to someone. You got to use your network, because otherwise you're not going to get through to these senior level leaders and whoever it is, whether it's recruiters, whether it's previous employees, that those are the kind of the gold dust. And what we're seeing more recently is a lot of people are moving somewhat outside of the DACH region, more to the other biotech hubs such as Barcelona, and those are the places that are really booming. And that's where you've got to sometimes now really just start low, build up.
Medical affairs has evolved now over the last, 3-4 years especially, where it's trying to become a core pillar in companies' organisations. So how have you seen the role evolve?
I think there's been a lot more demand. There's been a lot of talk on commercial medical affairs, this omni-channel approach that they have, and essentially how does medical affairs really show value? Because at the end of the day, it's about education. It's not about sales. You can't prove your worth by being their top selling drug. It's actually about what the real difference is about the product, and that's the job of medical affairs. And essentially, actually, I'd say one senior member, they were an associate director at Gilead I'd spoken to, and they actually created a tool where they had a behavioral questionnaire for HCPs before a congress or before a medical event, and then after. And it's really about the behavioral change with these physicians. What are they actually changing in their everyday practice, and do they see the real benefit in the product? And it's not focused on sales, like we say. It's actually about how can you educate, how can you create this change, and at the end of the day, be patient first and be patient focused.
Yeah. What is your take on the PhD, MD, sort of board certification? How can you stand out? Because it's so competitive now. Some companies just want MDs, which PhDs can't understand. What's your take on this?
It's an interesting debate, that's for sure. You hear a lot of people, MDs, saying, well, I've studied here for 8 years. I actually understand what the patient needs because I've been in clinic with them. But then you hear the PhDs that say, I've got all this publicatory experience, I've got all this leadership experience. I think it is difficult. And at the end of the day, for especially these kind of, I work in the DACH region, so these German-owned businesses that have their long-standing traditions, it's important for them to have an MD, and you can't really argue with that, especially when the science is backed. But in terms of a PhD, how do you stand out? You stand out by being a proven leader, by getting that opportunity, by being an innovative thinker, by, I guess, uplifting other employees and all different demographics, and really being a critical thinker that can go outside the box and think outside the box and prove value of medical affairs. And you'll get your opportunity at one point, but sometimes, like we say, you're probably not going to go from an MSL into a leading role if you have a PhD. But unfortunately, if you do have the clinical background, you will. So I think PhDs, sometimes you just got to stick in there for a bit longer, and you'll reap the rewards. Trust me, I've seen it before.
Nah, good answer. In terms of then advice for, medical affairs professionals out there, what would you say is the ideal, the perfect career?
I think starting in a field medical role, one where you're learning your ropes, you're learning of other colleagues at a local level, and then getting your big shot, maybe to go to a global medical advisor, having a bigger region, whether that's Europe, Canada, Europe, Asia. That's the traditional route we see. Changing indication, learning about different indications, whether we've had the debate PhD, MD, whichever background, you still have the scientific acumen where you understand the different products, and being able to use that is important. So going from maybe a global medical manager then to your leadership role, whether that's an associate director, a medical lead, an MSL lead, whatever it is, and sticking in there. And then we usually see someone who's been a big pharma for a wealth of their time in their career, wealth of time in the industry, maybe 20 years, then taking a step down and going, actually, I'm not going to be a big pharma anymore. I want to go to biotech. I want to explore the different avenues, the actual more responsibility you have, because there isn't these long-standing traditions in place, and you have more of an onus on yourself to really make a difference and go to a biotech. And then I think something we've been developing in ARTO a lot more recently, we're heading into maybe the venture capital business, maybe going into freelance and potentially in the venture capital, or potentially going to CMO, something like that. That's probably the ideal path, but you see hundreds of different routes.
Yeah, so many different routes. So then it's a very competitive market. You said there's 400 candidates applying to certain roles. It's interesting because they still use us. They still use recruiters. Not to say ARTO, but there still is hidden talent out there that, even though the applicants, that they can't do that, or they can't source them. So what, if I'm a client, how do I stand out? How do I attract the top talent? How do I ensure that the candidates don't take a counter offer? What could companies do to attract and also get that best talent?
Yeah, I think if we speak purely about the recruitment process, I think it starts way before an applicant applies. I think it's purely due to reputation that you see companies not getting applicants. If, say, you're using 10 different agencies and applicants or candidates are getting contacted by 10 different agencies, and that really ruins your reputation. So I think it starts 6 to 12 months prior to when an applicant applies, but also when we're talking about purely the actual process. If there's 6 different rounds and there's 10 days, 2 weeks in between different processes, and you're not hearing back, and it's not seamless, it's not defined, the timescale isn't proven, then you can see people kind of fall out of the process, whether that's because of the position or not, whether they might really like the position, but it's purely a timescale thing. The top candidates don't really stick around for that. So I'd say one piece of advice to clients is just be transparent. Just say, we've got this going on, we've got a delay, we have an audit, we can't hire you for 2 weeks, but you're our lead candidate, we want you. Then that is just the number one thing from candidates. In this environment, we understand 400 applicants, you can't reply to every single one of them, but you've got to prioritize the ones that really mean and that you have the intent to hire.
And that's such a big thing for us in terms of protecting our partners' brands, reputations, as much as we can. It's hard, but obviously with the interface. Where do you see the space going? And what I mean by that, in terms of now you're speaking about the candidates and how to stand out, the clients and how to stand out, but how can we match them together? How can we mirror them in terms of, understanding where this market is going for this war in talent?
I feel like it's just, we speak about transparency. I feel like it's just about being open from both sides of the view. I think clients really celebrating your success, whether it's through LinkedIn branding, showing what phases you're going into is something that's key. I think from a candidate point of view, I think similarly in terms of just using that network, making sure that people know, be your own biggest cheerleader, I would say, and make sure that everyone's aware of what's going on.
So talking about cheerleading, so you've seen a lot of success outside of recruitment in terms of rugby and how your career's trajectory very fast. And obviously the same at ARTO, where obviously winning new business is one of the hardest traits. And obviously you've been really successful in your first year here. Like, what things would you maybe provide or advice to someone maybe joining ARTO in terms of that? You've got multiple clients now on your roster. You've got companies that are willing to retain you because you're going out there and finding great talent. But what is it that's making you stand out, do you think, compared to others that are using you, especially in your first year?
Say someone's coming into this with zero market knowledge. I think the number one thing you need to do is strip it down to a personal level. And what I mean by that is, actually someone might be having a really stressful day. They might be attending 3 conferences in 6 months and they've got to prepare for every single one, and they actually only have 10 minutes for your conversation. Your 10-minute conversation can be the light of their day, where they have a break to actually calm down. And I think being able to be that presence where you take it to a personal level and you just have a conversation with them, literally simple things like telling them about your day, asking how their day is so important. And it goes so far, and it shows that although they're making a lot of money, that they know a lot, probably more than you, about the industry, and they very successful, and they can be put on this pedestal. They are only humans, and at the end of the day, they want talent. They want people that we connect with. They don't have the time to be speaking to these people all day, every day. It's a give and take industry where we can provide them with good applicants. They can tell us with who they want, and it's just about that kind of open transparency, but on a human level. And that comes with time. That doesn't happen 2 months into the role. That comes with connecting with someone every month for 6 months.
Amazing. Love it. Look, thank you very much for watching this episode with Owen. I hope you've enjoyed the insights. Definitely a lot of information to take on there. Continue to follow our LinkedIn. Thank you very much and have a great day.